the level of resource actually that's required in order for that to happen. We struggle now, if you think how long our CAMHS waiting lists are for our children and young people currently. So, you know, but the point that you make is a useful one.
Thank you. Councillor Begum.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, actually. So I was actually surprised with your answer because I don't quite fully agree from my perspective anyway. And although there are things to kind of help recognise mental health and promote mental health with young people, what we tend to see in FE and HE is a lot of students coming with a lot of baggage, and how they transition between FE, sort of secondary school, and FE and then sort of HE is really tricky for them. And that kind of sometimes brings to the forefront that they do have a mental health issue and they're not always sure of how to navigate themselves. So it's really sad to see some, I mean, I've had students today that have had disciplinary, and when you know, or if you do your psychology and what have you, you know that every behaviour is informed because of a trauma or something that they've experienced somewhere. And it's sad that processes and protocols say that this is a disciplinary action against the child. Instead of helping the child to understand what's going on and process what's going on with them, we instead kind of punish them through our education system. And I don't think that transition happens as well. And I know that we did have a conversation in previous meeting regarding the transition between sort of secondary school and FE. But another point, I think, and this was quite stark for me between myself and my own approach to teaching and my colleagues' approach to teaching, we both take very different stances. I'm more of an open door policy, and I kind of like to maintain the boundaries, but at the same time let them know that if there is an issue, that this is where you can come and we can work together to resolve it. So there's an answer for everything kind of thing, or an explanation at least. And there are other teachers that don't see it that way. They're very much, they struggle sometimes. They don't want to be the friend, but they don't want to be seen as being too lenient. And getting that balance sometimes is really, really tricky. And I have raised sort of this issue before, that teacher training doesn't adequately actually train teachers to deal with the number of issues and the baggage that young people come with. So, for example, before I trained to be a teacher, because my studies and what have you kind of involves sociology, psychology and child development all in one, I've got a better understanding and I can bring that with me when I come into my teaching. Whereas other teachers that I've come across and other colleagues and friends that teach, they don't have that knowledge. And because they don't have that knowledge, they go straight to the punitive measures of, okay, C1, C2, C3, you know, I don't want to hear it, that's it, you've done this, you've done... There's no explanation or no reasoning behind it, purely because they don't want to be seen by the rest of the class as being too lenient, or, you know, they feel that they need to assert that authority. So I think sometimes it's really, really tricky for teachers to kind of get that balance right, especially new teachers, or if you're a supply teacher. I've kind of been and done everything, and I've seen the differences of how students can teach, you know, treat teachers and what have you, and the paces that they really do put you through. So I do think that, like, you know, it's really, really difficult. So I think there's things that need to be perhaps implemented in the way that we train teachers, especially new teachers. I think it would be in terms of retention. Certainly in terms of retention is be honest with teachers that this is what you are going to find, especially with those young people that have come out of COVID, because they've been locked away in their homes. They may have been locked away in a traumatic situation where school may have been their safe haven. So we've kind of like kept them trapped for a certain amount of time. And now we're seeing the effects of that. I certainly see it in college with a number of students that they are kind of have their moments of rebellion. And that, unfortunately, because of the way that they do rebel or they react, that response has triggered a disciplinary rather than a sympathetic response from an institution. So in that sense, I think they face a double whammy. So they've got what's going on at home, which is traumatic for them. They kind of carry that baggage with them, and then they have an outburst, and then they're punished again, and it's not fair. But the other thing that I wanted to say is that in terms of assessments and things, do we take into account, I know we don't do assessments as such, but family history has a lot to do with sort of, in terms of trajectory and projecting where a child is heading and what they might possibly turn to. So I know the biological model, because I was teaching that this week as well. So the biological model kind of talks about looking at family histories. I know that social workers do genograms, but I did notice in that social worker conference that I attended last year, each social worker has a slightly different way of doing these genograms. And I think standardization is needed in terms of those types of genograms, but also it is really important not just to take the immediate family history, but also in terms of applying your ecological systems theory and looking at what are the different things happening, because there is culture to be that you have to take into account. As an Asian person myself, growing up, and I know that not specifically my daughter, but my daughter's friends do say that there is that expectation of that they will have to marry within the family, and that triggers behaviours in their, obviously in their environments, when they're in school, when they're with friends, or if they've got cousins, they don't want to be seen too close to the cousins because you can't call them whatever you want to call them because they could be a future whatever. So, you know, there's a lot. It's really complex, and I do know that you've got a lot on your plate in regards to all of these things. I mean, this is really good, but I still think we've got a long way to go, but there are other things that we need to consider. Sorry, I've waffled on for ages.
Thank you. That's very helpful, especially I'll make sure that more training for teachers is a key thing from that. Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the floor?
I just have one question. I'm looking at page 33, your page 29, with regards to access. I mean, we've heard that access is getting better, but it's still an issue. And even, you know, the recent tragedy in Luton. What is being done to make access better, and what lessons are being learned from historical failures?
I'm going to be honest and say I'm going to struggle to answer that one, and I would really like to come back with ELFT, our mental health provider, to talk in detail about what we're doing to improve access, because they're doing a lot of transformation work to try and make sure that people can access the services they need to in a timely way, that are culturally appropriate, culturally sensitive services. Yeah, I'd really like to be able to give you a good answer to that, and to come back on that one, if that's okay. Yeah, because I'm not going to be able to give you the full chapter and verse on that. We do talk in the action plan about what is planned to try and improve access, but they'll be able to give you a much better rundown, far better than I can. Sorry to not be able to give you a fully detailed response today. Is that all right to come back in the future? Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that would be fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I would just like to say then, before we end on this report, on page 29, you were talking about mental health crisis and suicides. In particular, that men, we know that men are at risk of more suicides than women anyway. But it said that during 2019 and 22, 50 suicides, 84% of those were men between 41 and 60 years old, and majority of them seem to be working in, or at least half of them working in a warehouse. I know that part of prevention is to reduce the stigma and work with employers, but I'm just wondering if there's more we can do, particularly as it's a warehouse environment that seems to be quite a heavy feature in those particular suicides. And not just the stigma, but the mindset of men. How do we propose to help work with those mindsets? And I know it's a very complex question to answer, but can you shed any light on that?
Yes, we're sort of straying into the next agenda item, but that's absolutely fine if you'd like to discuss suicide prevention. Yes, we need to do targeted work with men in routine and manual jobs. In particular, it is good that our suicide rate is below that of the England rate, but one suicide is too many. So yes, there is lots of work to do there. in terms of what we do, if we just have a quick look at the action plan for the next agenda item, it focuses specifically, the first one is on middle-aged men, and that's on the first one is develop initiatives to support around risk factors for suicide in middle-aged men, including financial difficulty, relationship breakdown, and mental ill health. And initiatives such as barbershop initiatives, we've been using those within public health around cancer, and so there's no reason why we shouldn't use that as a way in to get to men. There are lots of barbershops in Luton, and you know it's one possible avenue that we can go down. There's also the voluntary sector peer support groups, trying to encourage men to attend. And I suppose achieving or trying to move towards where it's culturally the norm to talk about your mental health and difficulties that you're going through. And that's quite a huge shift, I think, that we're looking to try and achieve, and it's not going to happen quickly. But we're always trying to be evidence-based around what works and what doesn't. And we're also looking at training frontline staff most likely to encounter middle-aged men in around suicide prevention awareness. So that's quite a broad term, frontline staff, because you could say, well, that's when people go to their GP practice, go to the hospital. That's lots of different places. So that's what those are along the lines that we're thinking. But we have a good team of people who are very experienced in knowing what works, who are developing this action plan. We're starting up a local Luton group that hopefully will be driving the actions in Luton specifically, because as you'll see, this is a BLMK-wide initiative. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, because it is a very complex thing, because the points I've done have just come straight from this report, and of course, as it does, as you say, it's starting to stray into the other report, which I don't want to really do. Councillor Keynes, I believe you have a question?
My apologies, Chair, I've got to leave.
Okay, thank you.
I may be a bit naive, but can you explain very quickly the barbershop system?
That's about men who go to the barbers and training up the barbers themselves to have those conversations, have conversations with men about have you thought, how are you feeling, how are you doing? Around cancer, we've talked about specific risks around cancer, what are the different signs and symptoms, and being able to signpost people to appropriate support services. So that's really the kind of model that it's about. It's going to where men go, is the idea.
That's intriguing.
So, yes.
My barbers are all women. How do we get over that?
Are there any more questions regarding this report? Councillor... Sorry, I thought you'd finished, Councillor Keynes. Councillor Skeppelhorn.
It's not so much a question as a comment. I like the idea of the barbershop process because speaking as a middle-aged man, we're very reluctant to go for professional help. We don't go to the doctor. Well, I do because I'm a wimp. But in general, we tend not to go to the doctors, not to seek help. So anything where you can achieve a conversation with somebody and get them directed to go is going to be very helpful. So I really like that idea. I would say local pubs, but the fact is, if you're there, you're drinking and you're not going to be, you don't care. And that's not the place for that kind of conversation. But certainly the barbers, and there are one or two charity organisations that, yeah, there is, that's the one I was thinking of, Extra, I think it's called Extra. They are aimed at the younger end of adults, but they're a group set up to talk to men about their mental health and physical health. So they're sort of the people as well that you can find. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really good, helpful suggestions by Councillor Skepperhorn. I think it's also worth considering. I'm sure you have already considered, and I'm sorry if I've not been able to sort of pick up on that, but worth talking to different faith groups as well and faith leaders. Yeah, and
yes, we will do that.
Yeah, and also I think maybe tapping into schools as well and speaking to dads and things like that.
Thank you. So I think we'll wrap that one up there. There are no more questions. Thank you very much for that report. I think it's a very challenging subject, and I can see that you're working very hard on it to improve the situation. Thank you. Can we now please look at item 11? It's on the last pack that we were given, which is pages 1 to 10. And can I ask the officer, please, to deliver that report? Oh, I've forgotten one thing. I beg your pardon. I do apologise. I'll be all happy for the recommendations to go through for item 10. Thank you. So if you could do item 11, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So this item is looking at suicide prevention. We've already spoken about the fact that we have done an audit of data from 2019 to 2022, so a 4-year period in which sadly 50 suicides took place in Luton. I'm very aware that this is children's scrutiny, yes. So I was looking, and of those, none were under 18, but 9 of them were in 18 to 25-year-olds. So it's an incredibly important topic. We work across Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes on this issue to implement the national strategy. So the action plan that you'll see in the Excel spreadsheet that I've sent you is our plans for the next, well, up until 2028. So as I said earlier, there is a BLMK-wide group driving this forward, a steering group, but we're going to start our own Luton-specific one to make sure that we're driving these actions and interventions in Luton. I'm very open to any comments or questions that you have about the action.
Councillor Keynes.
Yeah, I'm quite concerned about this one. It's not mentioned in here, and Councillor Khan has just mentioned the Facebook. A lot of the problem with suicides is Facebook. There's no mention in here at all about social media or the internet. I'll come across, I like your comments on that, but I will come back as well on another part of that item.
Thank you. Yes, I think you're right. You've spotted an important gap in our plan there. So I'll take that back to the group and make sure that we address social media concerns, but also around how social media can be used as a prevention tool as well. So yes, yeah, thank you.
The other part of that is harmful gambling. Now, if you, at the moment, I'm having to stay at home and watch television, which is depressing to start off with. And most of the adverts in the afternoon and in the evening are all designed for gambling. They're dreadful. They're terrible. Easy money. If you're sitting at home, yeah, dead easy. You've got your mobile. See, I don't even know about it. You've got your mobile. You just have to plonk things in and you're onto the gambling system. Is there nothing we can do about this at all, ever, anywhere?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Gambling, and then which leads to financial difficulties, is a risk factor for suicide. We are starting in the public health team to look at gambling and what we can do to tackle the issue from a public health perspective. There are things that we can do. There are other local authorities that are doing quite a lot of work around this. So, yeah, I can come back again with something around what we're going to do in terms of looking at gambling in the future.
Can I just make a suggestion? The new government likes to look at this sort of thing. Well, yeah. Perhaps a message to our MPs, our two local MPs, to ask for their views, and if they could not put the government into doing something.
Thank you. Yes, yes, that's a good suggestion.
Councillor Wynne.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of things. This item concerned me a little bit because this is children's scrutiny, and I wondered about the applicability of this particular item into this committee. That's a matter, I think, for the chair of this committee to look at in future. But if I take the general thing, and we look at some of the wider groups, there are one or two initiatives going on around the town. I would say that, and having had the misfortune within my family to have somebody attempt to commit suicide, I do think that we don't concentrate enough on some of the community groups that can help. For example, it depends on ethnicity. It also depends on the sex, whether it's a man or a woman. But some of the preventions can be very physically related. So, for example, the work that's being done around Dallow with boxing clubs and so on, and some of the community initiatives. There is one men's group operating out of Rainham Way Community Centre, for example. And I think that we're not really being active enough, and I'm not sure how much of that is down to the council or how much it's down to the other community groups, but it seems to me that we're not sort of working together enough. It just doesn't seem to be very active. And also, if I can just pick up, and then I'll shut up again, but if I pick up as well, and it links into the previous item as well, which I didn't jump in on. The general public perception is that mental health support in all its forms is not very easily available. If I have somebody now, like the member of my family was, who really would have used CBT support, there was over a 2.5 year wait to get some CBT support. Now, I'm sorry, but if you've got somebody who is feeling in any way suicidal, not being able to get help, and even if you do manage to finally find your way somehow through the system, that the answer you get is, well, it could be 2.5 years before I can even get anybody to see you. And then based again on the personal experience, they go twice, they don't really get on well with the person that's doing the CBT. And if you're not happy with them, then it's another 2.5 years before you can see somebody else. It's totally inadequate. Now, I'm not sure whether that's down to the health service, whether it's down to the council, whether it's down to what, but somehow this knot isn't being joined up. That's just my observation. Sorry, maybe shut up, David.
No, thank you. Your comments are extremely helpful, and I think you're right. There's always more we can do to join up our working between community groups, what the council are doing, what the health services are doing. You're absolutely right. We do have a mental health system leaders group where leaders from all those different sectors, and you could probably argue that we should have more community representation at that group, get together and talk about how we're going to